It was a chilly evening in late October 2019. The sun had just set, and the streets of Los Angeles were glowing with lights. Keanu Reeves, a famous actor known for his kindness, walked into a fancy hotel. He was dressed simply, wearing a black jacket and jeans. He looked like just another traveler, tired from a long day. But what nobody in the hotel knew was that Keanu wasn't just any guest. He was the secret owner of this hotel. Keanu had built it to be a place where people could feel welcome and cared for, no matter who they were. He wanted everyone to experience kindness and warmth. As Keanu walked into the beautiful hotel lobby, he went up to the front desk. The receptionist, a lady named Madeline, was standing there. She looked sharp and professional, wearing a neat uniform. Madeline was in her early 30s and always tried to look like she was in charge. When she saw Keanu, Madeline frowned. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a strict voice. "Do you even have a reservation? We don't just let anyone walk in here." Keanu raised his eyebrows, surprised by her tone. He stayed calm and answered softly, "Actually, I do." He reached into his pocket to get his phone, where he had the email confirming his reservation. Madeline didn't seem to care. She rolled her eyes and muttered loudly enough for other guests to hear, "People like you think you can just walk into a place like this. This isn't some cheap motel." Keanu handed her his phone, showing the email. But Madeline barely looked at it. She crossed her arms and said, "This hotel is for important people like celebrities and CEOs. It's not for everyone. If you can't afford it, there's a motel down the street." Keanu stayed quiet for a moment. A flicker of sadness crossed his face, but he didn't lose his calm. Across the lobby, a young couple named Victoria and William were sitting by the fireplace. They were high school sweethearts, now in their late 20s, celebrating their anniversary. They couldn't help but overhear the conversation. "Isn't that Keanu Reeves?" Victoria whispered to William. "It really looks like him." William squinted at Keanu. "No way," he said. "Why would Keanu Reeves be here?" Meanwhile, Madeline kept scolding Keanu, ignoring the growing discomfort of the other guests. "We have an image to maintain," she said with a smirk. "This isn't the kind of place for someone like you." Finally, Keanu spoke, his voice steady but firm. "Is this how you treat all your guests?" Madeline gave him a sarcastic smile. "Only the ones who don't belong," she replied. She reached for the phone to call security, but before she could dial, someone else walked into the lobby. It was Michael, the hotel manager. Michael was an older man who had worked with Keanu for years, helping him run the hotel. When Michael saw Keanu, his face went pale. He quickly walked over, looking worried. "Madeline," he said, his voice urgent. "I'm handling a situation," Madeline replied, waving her hand dismissively toward Keanu. Michael looked horrified. "That's not just a guest," he said. "That's Mr. Reeves. He owns the hotel." The lobby went completely silent. Madeline froze, her face turning as white as paper. The other guests stared, realizing they had been watching something much bigger than they thought. Keanu stood quietly, his face calm. He didn't say anything right away, letting the weight of Michael's words sink in. Victoria and William exchanged shocked glances. "I knew it," Victoria whispered. Madeline stammered, "Mr. Reeves, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." Her voice shook as she realized her mistake. Keanu looked at her with kind but serious eyes. "I believe in kindness," he said. "It's the reason this hotel exists. I wanted this to be a place where everyone feels welcome, no matter who they are or how they look." Madeline's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what I was thinking," she said, her voice cracking. "I let my pride get in the way. Please forgive me." Keanu didn't answer right away. He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of the guests who had been watching. He saw Victoria and William by the fireplace, their faces full of admiration. "I wasn't always someone who could afford a place like this," Keanu said, his voice full of emotion. "There was a time when I didn't know where I would sleep or what I would eat. That's why I wanted this hotel to be different." Victoria and William felt tears well up in their eyes. They knew about Keanu's hard past, how he had lost his best friend, his girlfriend, and their unborn baby. Hearing him talk about it so openly made them feel even more respect for him. Madeline wiped her tears, her hands trembling. "I'll do better," she said softly. "I promise." Michael, the manager, stepped forward. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "I take full responsibility for what happened. This is not what we stand for. I promise things will change." Keanu nodded, his face thoughtful. "Words are easy," he said. "What matters is how you treat people even when no one is watching. That's what defines you." As Keanu prepared to leave the lobby, something unexpected happened. A little boy, no older than 8, walked up to him. He was holding his mother's hand and looked a bit nervous. "Mr. Reeves," the boy said, his voice tiny and shaky. Keanu knelt down so he could talk to the boy face to face. "Hey there, buddy," he said gently. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "My dad used to watch your movies with me," the boy said. "Before he went to heaven, he told me you're the nicest person in Hollywood." I think he was right. Keanu's eyes filled with tears as he unfolded the paper. It was a drawing of a superhero, and at the top, the boy had written, "To Mr. Reeves, the real superhero." The whole room was silent, but this time it wasn't because of shock. Everyone was in awe of the moment. Keanu gently hugged the boy. "Your dad must have been an amazing person," he said softly. "Thank you for sharing this with me. It means more than you know." The boy smiled shyly and his mom wiped tears from her face. She mouthed the words, "Thank you," to Keanu. Keanu stood up, still holding the boy's drawing. He looked around at the guests one last time. "This hotel isn't just about being fancy," he said. "It's about people. Let's never forget that." As Keanu walked out of the lobby, Victoria and William looked at each other, their hearts full. Their anniversary would now be a story they'd tell forever. A story of kindness, forgiveness, and the power of being humble. Keanu left the hotel that night, but the message he shared stayed with everyone. It wasn't just a fancy hotel anymore. It was a place where kindness could truly shine. Madeline was shaking, her hands trembling as she stood there, overwhelmed by the weight of her actions. She had made a big mistake and the guilt was almost too much to bear. Her eyes followed Keanu as he knelt in front of the little boy. Something deep inside her shifted as she watched them. Her tears weren't just because she felt ashamed. They were because of an ache she had ignored for years. Madeline had spent so much of her life trying to fit into the fancy world of rich and important people that she had forgotten what it felt like to truly connect with others. Keanu's words kept playing in her head. "How you treat people when no one's watching is what shows who you really are." The boy and his mother began to walk toward the door, but before they left, Keanu called out to them, "Wait." His voice was calm but carried so much emotion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, scratched keychain. It was shiny but old, something that had clearly been kept for a long time. Keanu knelt down again to the boy's level and held out the keychain. "Your dad must have been a great man," Keanu said softly. "I want you to have this. It's from a movie I made a long time ago. It's not much, but maybe it will remind you that heroes can come in all shapes and sizes." The boy's eyes grew wide, and his small hands trembled as he carefully took the keychain from Keanu. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," he whispered, his voice barely louder than a breath. Keanu gave him a gentle smile, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes, something heavy that he carried quietly. As the boy and his mother walked out of the hotel lobby, Keanu stood there, watching them until they disappeared through the revolving doors. In the corner of the room, Victoria leaned closer to William, her husband, and whispered, "You can see it in his eyes, can't you? He's carrying so much pain." William nodded thoughtfully. "But look at what he does with it. He turns it into something good. He helps people." Keanu walked back to the front desk where Madeline was standing. She was wringing her hands nervously, her face red and tear-streaked. She tried to speak again to apologize, but Keanu gently raised his hand, stopping her. "I don't need an apology," he said softly, his voice kind but firm. "What I need is change." Madeline nodded quickly, tears running down her face. "I'll do better," she promised. "I swear I will." Keanu gave her a small nod, his expression softening. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." Suddenly, the soft sound of piano music filled the lobby. Everyone turned to see where it was coming from. An older man, who worked at the hotel as a maintenance worker, had sat down at the grand piano in the corner of the room. His name tag read Steven, and he looked to be in his 70s. Steven's fingers moved gracefully across the keys, playing a beautiful and haunting tune called Clair de Lune. Though his hands were old, they seemed to dance effortlessly, filling the room with music that touched everyone's hearts. Keanu turned toward the piano, a smile of recognition lighting up his face. When Steven finished, Keanu clapped softly, his applause gentle but full of appreciation. Steven looked up, startled, as if he hadn't realized anyone was paying attention. "That was amazing," Keanu said warmly as he walked over to the piano. "How long have you been playing?" Steven chuckled, scratching the back of his head. "Longer than I've been fixing pipes, that's for sure," he said with a laugh. "My wife used to love this piece. I played it for her every night before she passed." Keanu's smile grew sad, his eyes softening even more. "She must have been very lucky to have someone who loved her like that." Steven shook his head gently, a faint smile on his lips. I was the lucky one. The room became still and quiet, everyone feeling the weight of Steven's words. Keanu placed a hand on Steven's shoulder. "Thank you for sharing that with us," he said quietly, his voice filled with respect. Steven nodded, his eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Not just for listening but for seeing people." Keanu stepped back, his mind turning over Steven's words. He looked around the lobby, his gaze taking in everyone there. He saw Madeline standing near the desk, her face full of emotion. He saw Victoria and William sitting by the fireplace, holding hands tightly. He saw the boy and his mother just outside the glass doors walking away. And he saw Steven by the piano, his hand still resting lightly on the keys. For a moment, Keanu felt the weight of everything, the sadness, the loss, the love, and the hope. It all felt so heavy, but at the same time, there was something beautiful about it. Turning back to face the room, Keanu spoke, his voice steady and full of quiet strength. "The hardest part about being human is carrying the weight of everything you've lost. But that's also what makes love so powerful. It's what keeps us going." Victoria started crying openly now, reaching for William's hand. Across the room, Madeline wiped her tears, silently promising herself that she would never let another person feel invisible again. Keanu, still holding the boy's drawing in his hand, began walking toward the elevators. His steps were quiet, his presence humble, but the people in the lobby would never forget what they had just experienced. As the elevator doors closed behind him, the lobby remained still. The moment connected everyone in the room, like an invisible thread tying them together. Madeline sank into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. She had never felt so small, so exposed, but at the same time she felt a deep longing to be better, to find the kindness she had lost somewhere along the way. Victoria and William sat together by the warm glow of the fireplace, their anniversary now holding an even deeper meaning. Victoria turned to William, her voice trembling. "Do you think people really understand how much pain he's been through?" William shook his head. "Probably not. People see the actor, the celebrity. They don't see the man who's had to rebuild himself again and again." Upstairs, Keanu walked into his private suite. The room was beautiful, filled with elegant furniture and thoughtful details, but to him, it felt cold and empty. He placed the boy's drawing on a desk near the window and stared at it for a long time. The boy's words echoed in his mind. "My dad said you were the nicest person in Hollywood." Keanu sat down slowly, his hands trembling as they touched the paper. His thoughts drifted to his own father, a man who had left when Keanu was just a boy. No matter how much he had achieved or how far he had gone in life, that empty space had never been filled. He thought about Samantha, the love of his life. She should have been here with him now, sitting by his side, laughing about the strange and beautiful moments of life. But she was gone, and her absence was a wound that would never fully heal. Even so, Keanu carried her memory with him in everything he did, honoring the love they had shared. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, his voice hoarse. Michael, the hotel manager, stepped into the room. "Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to check on you. I know tonight was a lot," he said, his face full of concern. Keanu gave him a small smile. "I'm fine, Michael," he replied quietly. But Michael hesitated, looking unsure. "You know, when we started this hotel, you told me something I've never forgotten," he began. "You said people don't come to places like this for the fancy rooms or the big swimming pools. They come here looking for connection, a moment that reminds them why life is worth living." Keanu nodded slowly, his eyes distant. Michael continued, his voice soft but earnest. "I think tonight you gave everyone in that lobby one of those moments. Even Madeline. Especially Madeline." Keanu chuckled faintly, though his eyes were watery. "Let's hope she takes it to heart," he said quietly. Michael stepped closer, his expression serious. "You're not just the owner of this hotel, Mr. Reeves. You're the heart of it. You give people something they carry with them long after they leave." Keanu looked at Michael, his throat tight with emotion. "Sometimes I wonder if I have anything left to give," he admitted softly. Michael shook his head firmly. "You have more to give than most people ever will. And it's because you've lived through so much. You've turned your pain into something that helps others heal." Keanu didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Later that night, as the hotel grew quiet and the city lights sparkled outside, Keanu sat by the window, lost in thought. Despite the pain he carried, he still found ways to share love and kindness. And that, he knew, was what kept him moving forward. Keanu sat at the desk with the boy's drawing in front of him. He picked up a pen, turned the paper over, and wrote a note on the back. The message was simple but heartfelt. "To the boy who reminded me that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, Thank you for being mine tonight, Keanu. He carefully folded the paper, placed it in an envelope, and left it at the front desk the next morning. He asked the staff to make sure it was delivered to the boys' room before they checked out. Downstairs, Madeline arrived early. Her eyes were red from a sleepless night of thinking about her mistakes. Michael was already there, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "You're here early," he said, handing her the cup. Madeline nodded, her voice soft and shaky. "I want to start over." "I need to." Michael studied her for a moment and then smiled. "Then let's make today count." Madeline took her place behind the desk. The hotel lobby grew busy with the morning rush. Guests hurried to meetings, some lingered over coffee and pastries, and the atmosphere buzzed with activity. Amid the crowd, Madeline spotted the boy and his mother walking toward the doors. The boy clutched the envelope tightly, holding it like a treasure. His face glowed with happiness. As they neared the exit, the boy suddenly stopped. He turned around and looked around the room. His eyes found Madeline. He raised his hand and waved at her, a small but meaningful gesture. Madeline froze, her throat tight as emotion welled up inside her. She waved back, her hand trembling, and a tear slipped down her cheek. At that moment, she realized something important. It wasn't just Keanu who had given the boy a gift. The boy had given all of them a chance to grow, to be better. Upstairs, Keanu sat by the window, gazing at the bustling city below. The boy's drawing and words stayed with him, etched into his heart. Outside, the boy and his mother crossed the street. The morning sunlight made everything glow in a golden hue. The boy looked up at his mother with a big smile and said, "I told you, Mom. He's a real superhero." Inside the hotel, Madeline discreetly wiped her tears. She returned to her work, greeting guests with a newfound warmth and kindness. Michael noticed the change in her demeanor, the way her tone softened and her smile became more genuine. Keanu's words had taken root, inspiring her to change. Upstairs, Keanu looked at the boy's drawing again. The words written in shaky handwriting, "To Mr. Reeves, the real superhero," brought up memories of his own pain and struggles. He thought about how fans often called him a hero because of his movies or the stories of his kindness. But hearing it from a child, a boy who had lost his father, felt different. It reminded him of the times in his life when he needed someone to look up to but couldn't find anyone. He walked over to a small safe in the corner of the room and opened it. Inside were treasured keepsakes: a photo of Samantha, his late fiancée, a bracelet his sister had given him before she passed away, and an old, worn book that belonged to his late friend River Phoenix. Each item carried a story, a memory of love and loss. Carefully, he tucked the boy's drawing between the pages of the book, adding it to his collection of cherished memories. As he closed the safe, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael. "Thank you for last night. You reminded all of us why we're here. Madeline wanted me to tell you she's ready to change. I think we all are." Keanu smiled faintly and replied, "Kindness is a ripple. Let's keep it going." Later that day, as Keanu prepared to leave the hotel, he made one last stop in the lobby. The staff had gathered to see him off. Their faces were full of gratitude and admiration. Madeline stepped forward nervously, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice trembling. "Thank you, not just for last night but for giving me a second chance. I promise to do better." Keanu's gaze was kind and steady. "It's not about being perfect," he said. "It's about trying to be better than we were yesterday. Keep trying." As Keanu stepped outside, the crisp autumn air greeted him. The streets were alive with people, their voices blending into the city's hum. Keanu took a deep breath, feeling like just another face in the crowd, and he liked it that way. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He typed, "Sometimes the smallest moments remind us of the biggest truths. Kindness matters. Love heals. Even in the darkest times, we can be someone's light." He slipped his phone back into his pocket and began walking. The boy's drawing and words stayed with him, a powerful reminder that heroes don't just exist in movies. They are found in the small acts of love and kindness we share with one another. And maybe, even with all the loss he had faced, Keanu realized that he could still give, still care, and still love. Sometimes that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.